Virtual worlds were the popular business venture in the mid-2000s. There were sites based on toys, Disney franchises, Coca-Cola for some reason. But if anything, having such an oversaturated market didn't exactly help in creating a space where all of these worlds could thrive. Many of them, even some of the most popular sites, didn't last more than a few years before shutting down. In 2025, there are only a few of these original virtual worlds from the 2000s left, and one that I loved as a kid, and still play today, is Webkinz. Webkinz recently celebrated its 20th anniversary in April, which is something I and plenty of other players never fully expected to happen, considering all of the fallen heroes that came before it. Since first launching in 2005, it's undergone tons of changes and updates, but even though it does look a little different than it did around its peak in 2009 with millions of active players, it's not just still running, but still being regularly maintained and updated. And while the current player base might not be in the millions, there are still lots of dedicated Webkinz fans that are still around and make the game worth updating in the first place. The 20th anniversary celebration was set up to be a highly anticipated event from the start. 20 years is a big milestone for any company, never mind one that still manages to carry on past the popularity of virtual worlds and the discontinuance of Flash. Most Webkinz players were expecting something like the game's 10-year anniversary, which saw a special new pet, in-game items, and different prizes. Year 10 also even introduced a brand new UI and overhauled game features, which actually didn't go over super well with longtime players, but the effort was there. It was something to not just celebrate the anniversary and reward players, but to breathe new life into the game. Because Year 10 set such a high standard, though, when the 20th anniversary did finally come, it was unfortunately a little underwhelming. It wasn't bad, per se. There were still prizes and game items and new virtual pets that were given to players for free, but some people felt like it just didn't quite live up to the hype for such a big achievement. The game's anniversary, called Webkinz Day, actually gets celebrated in-game every year, not just during the larger milestones, and it typically consists of an in-game gift box, a way to earn a free pet, and a few in-game events taking place leading up to and during the anniversary. And Year 20 did have all these things, but that was the thing. It was mostly all the same regular stuff, and there weren't many aspects that made it feel that much different from any other Webkinz Day. There was a celebration, but where was the effort? One of the main features of Webkinz Day is getting to spin the in-game super wheel, something that only comes around on major holidays, and because of that is usually stocked with really valuable in-game items. But the Year 20 super wheel was just not very super, to say the least. Without getting too much into the nitty-gritty of Webkinz item values and super wheel politics, this analogy is for any non-Webkinz players. If this was a real-life money wheel instead, this is basically what the Year 10 super wheel would equate to. Diamonds that aren't just valuable, but priceless because of their rarity. And this is the Year 20 super wheel. Do you see the issue? Overall, the 20th Webkinz Day wasn't a total letdown, but it just felt a little lackluster, all things considered.
Okay, I got a statue.
The only reason that Webkinz has managed to stick around for so long is because of the players. So while the super wheel controversy might seem a little silly, it gave the impression that our 20-year experience wasn't a priority. Honestly, it wasn't necessarily about how much cool free stuff we could get, but about how much care was put into the anniversary. At least aside from the super wheel, there were still plenty of good things that came from it. They introduced this cute Canadian goose as a pet, and finally got rid of the dreaded Webkinz Day kiwis after 4 years, which maybe sounds kind of weird out of context. If you're curious about what I mean, I recommend watching my Webkinz iceberg video to hear all about it. Anyway, I think at the end of the day, most players were all just glad that we had reached the 20th anniversary at all, and even with its faults, both the anniversary and the game itself, with lots of existing bugs from being 20 years old, no one could really complain. And if they could, well, they weren't mad, just a little disappointed. But not all hope was lost. Amidst the slightly lackluster celebration, also on Webkinz Day, April 29th, 2025, there came an official announcement that blew any other complaints out of the water. This was something even bigger than a cool new Canadian goose, and more important than an underwhelming super wheel. Webkinz was making a return to browsers. Today, on the 20th anniversary of our launch, we are proud to announce that Webkinz Classic will be returning to browsers later this year. We've had one goal with this project: get everything working from the curio shop to the employment office to the games. And all this works with your existing data. Playing in a browser will just be another way to play. The post goes on to mention that the project is still a work in progress, and bug testing and beta events are still in the works before the official launch. But the aim is for an early Q4 release, aka the end of this year, which is still very soon and super exciting. With an announcement of this caliber, most people pretty quickly moved on from complaining about the in-game 20th anniversary. If resources were being devoted to something this important and large-scale, then a disappointing super wheel was more than excusable in the grand scheme of things. If anyone from Webkinz is watching this, I'm sorry for doubting you. If you're familiar with Webkinz but haven't played in a bit, you might be wondering, wait, wasn't Webkinz always a website? What does this really mean? Why does it matter? Well, let me explain. The game was first launched as a website, webkinz.com, in 2005, and was played entirely within browsers online, up until 2020 when Adobe Flash was discontinued. Since the game was built almost entirely in Flash, it was around this time that Webkinz migrated over to a standalone app that's downloaded onto your computer. Still the same game, same user accounts, pretty much a copy and paste of the existing experience, but now just accessed in a new place. Which was obviously great news for the continuation of the game and all the dedicated players who could keep playing, but less great news for the game's future development. This new app was a modified version of existing 15-year-old code made from 3 different versions of a now-defunct software ported over for the sake of preservation rather than adaptability. In other words, it could still be played, but it couldn't really be changed going forward. The game, in general, is unable to be fixed. And it's not because they don't care, but because it's not exactly worth trying to fix the giant hamburger that sometimes randomly glitches in the W shop if it could mean breaking the entire game while they're at it, which is disappointing to hear, but understandable considering the risk. With this upcoming return to browsers though, fixing the giant hamburger won't just be possible, but it'll be a priority. Well, maybe not the hamburger specifically, but the Webkinz team plans to, quote, fix features and develop new features, including features that have been missing for too long. If you're wondering what's so wrong that needs fixing in the first place, that's kind of subjective, because there are a lot of possible answers, and they vary in importance depending on who you ask. So rather than just listing random stuff, let's take a look at some of the most requested changes that people are hoping to see specifically in this browser relaunch, conveniently compiled in Reddit posts asking that exact question. Some things are features that used to exist in-game but were retired or removed at some point, like visiting the houses of friends, speaking to your own pets with chat options, visiting Dr. Quack for a checkup, the Wacky Logout Carnival, Dicekins, interactive gardening, maze and hamsters, and Debbie Dragon in the travel agency, just to name a few. Other features weren't intentionally removed and are just bugged to the point of not working anymore, like watchable TVs that are now unwatchable, animated items that are no longer animated, and party packs that still have the pack, but none of the party. There are a good number of visual glitches that fit this category too, like the random giant food items in the W shop, the iconic curio shop rave glitch, game areas overlapping onto each other, Webkinz pets duplicating themselves, and the classic blank dialogue box, among plenty of others. And the rest are less things that are broken or missing, and more quality of life changes. The ability to zoom in to resize the game window, because most of the time while playing it actually looks like this. a search bar for the dock to find items more easily instead of just endlessly clicking the page arrows, being able to change existing pet names, something I'm sure many players who started their accounts when they were half illiterate kids would love to see, changes made to the room decorating system, like moving doors and not being limited to a grid placement, and reworking some of the features that were introduced with that big 10-year update I mentioned before, which is known as the infamous Webkinz X. Speaking of Webkinz X, a lot of the features that are missing, broken, or generally disliked were almost all due to this update being implemented. So you can imagine that after 10 years of hoping for some of these changes to be fixed or reversed, this return to browsers where that may now finally be a possibility is a big deal for regular players. Of course, there are even more changes that tons of players hope to see, but that would take too long to list, so just know that overall, there's a lot of room for improvement. Based on the browser relaunch announcement though, the Webkinz team seems to understand that. This project is just one of the many steps that we will be taking to ensure that the next 20 years provides even more joy and fun to all of our players, new and old alike. Webkinz has been essentially completely deconstructed and put back together again, not just for current players to feel seen, but for accessibility and sustainability for the future of the game. Forget anything I said about the Super Wheel. I know that the Webkinz team does truly care. I was just being a little greedy. While there's of course no confirmation on what changes will or won't be implemented, I'm willing to take the sort of vagueness of the announcement post as a good thing. It seems like there are not only specific changes that are already in store, whatever they may be, but also that the current rebuilt state of the game has almost endless possibilities for what could still be addressed in the future. There are probably lots of features that aren't able to be reworked at all, whether because of broken code or lost assets or any other reason, but in a way, the surprise of seeing what will make a comeback or not is part of the fun, so I'm remaining hopeful. If 10 years sounds like too long to have left some of these issues or requested changes go unchecked, there should probably be a little asterisk included next to that number, because it has been 10 years since any major changes have been made. In Webkinz Classic, that is. In 2020 though, a new Webkinz game was launched, separate and completely different from the original model, Webkinz Next. Created as a modern successor to the original game, now deemed Webkinz Classic, Webkinz Next is a 3D rendered Unity game that not only introduced some newer, modern features, but also addressed some of the changes that were in demand but unable to be fulfilled in Classic. Freeform decorating, including no grid restriction and the ability to move doors, an open area map concept that allows you to see and interact with other players around the world, visiting the houses of other players, more in-depth cooking, changing your in-game player name, and plenty of other features are all currently available in Webkinz Next. But even though a lot of these aspects could be considered an improvement, many classic players still just don't find Next appealing overall. It's just too different, too uncanny, too ugly, too reliant on microtransactions, and too baby, since one of the main gameplay aspects revolves around making Webkinz babies, which unfortunately just doesn't really interest most existing classic players, from what I've heard around the community, at least. Allegedly. Not to mention that a year before the introduction of Next, Webkinz announced the discontinuation of classic physical plush pets due to declining sales, only to release a new generation of plush pets with the launch of Next that were also very different and very modern, to say the least. For classic Webkinz enjoyers, it wasn't really an ideal announcement, but again, understandable at the very least. We'd miss our classic plush and keep playing what we were familiar with, but the brand was overall moving in a new direction. This modern version seemed to be intended to reach a new, younger generation of players, which could hopefully offer Webkinz some new traffic and financial stability, which is a good thing overall. Plus, in the meantime, Classic was still running and being updated, so it was easy to just not play Next if you didn't want to, and accept the shortcomings of Classic if it meant the game could still exist at all. Since this setup has been the norm for 5 years now, with Next and Classic running alongside each other and Next taking over as the newer priority, it's safe to say that almost no one expected a browser relaunch for Classic. As much as it was unexpected though, a second major event was even more unexpected, especially as it surfaced within the same week as the first announcement. This one was admittedly more of a rumor than an announcement, but it was still circulating and implying the unthinkable. The return of classic Webkinz plush pets. For context, while classic Webkinz aren't officially sold in stores anymore, you can still find old plush to buy if you look in the right places. There are Webkinz sold on sites like eBay and Mercari, at secondhand stores like Goodwill, and you can even sometimes find the occasional small gift shop selling their old dead stock Webkinz out in the wild, if you get really lucky. But for the experience's sake, and to hopefully avoid insane price gouging for the more sought-after pets, being able to properly and officially buy new Webkinz in stores again in 2025 would be something entirely different, which is why this rumor is such a big deal. I'll be honest, I usually don't really like over-speculation without any real concrete information, but at this point, this seems less like a rumor and more like a hint hint nudge nudge kind of situation, and it's all but been confirmed by Webkinz themselves. Also, I'm just excited, so sorry, but I am gonna speculate on this one just a little bit. The community has been in full-blown detective mode for the past 2 weeks, searching for clues ranging from cryptic comments to toy store DMs, and I gotta say, it all stacks up. So let's review the evidence, shall we? Beginning with the least credible and or significant and working our way up to the big stuff. To start, there's this comment from, admittedly, just a random person on a random Webkinz related post, but they allegedly work at a toy store that they claim is set to receive new Webkinz plush with codes in 12 new designs. Intriguing. But their username checks out. They're just that Canadian person. So not really a trustworthy source. But what about info directly from the Webkinz account itself? Well, maybe using info is overselling it a little. It was actually just a response to a comment left on their browser relaunch post. The comment in question, "Okay, now re-release classic Webkinz plush in stores," to which Webkinz replied, thinking emoji. Comments that make you go, This may seem insignificant, but similar to how requests for in-game fixes and changes have been repeated over the years, requests for the return of classic plush have been just as, if not even more common. And let it be known that Webkinz almost never directly addresses comments about plush re-releases either. Until now. On Webkinz Day, after the announced return to browsers with a thinking emoji? Interesting. Very interesting. Next, also directly from Webkinz, is a video about Webkinz signatures, a higher-end, more detailed line of plush pets that ran for about 4 years total. The video provides commentary by a Webkinz plush designer and the head of plush product development at Gans, the parent company of Webkinz. While it's really just a minute's worth of talking about thread details and fur textures, there's no mention of the return of classic plush, and the caption of the video explains that it was posted as a reflection for the 20th anniversary. The timing is still suspicious, considering the rumors. Then there's the Learning Express saga. Learning Express is a toy store with franchised locations in 27 states, one of which being the Lake Zurich store. This particular store's owner, Rick Durr, made a Facebook post on May 11th about not just the return of Webkinz to browsers, but about how the store would be helping Webkinz with the relaunch in May of 2025. The post also linked a YouTube video where he gets into more detail. Rick mentions that the Lake Zurich store was one of the earliest Webkinz retailers back in 2006, and he even kept the original sign display and promotional DVD that was included back then to help advertise in stores, which is really cute, and lets you know he's one of the OGs. He then explains that he has since received the paperwork to be an official Webkinz dealer again, so that he can sell the quote, new designs that are supposedly set to ship to his store sometime in May.
I don't have the new designs yet, okay? But soon we will, because the launch is in May of 2025. That's coming up. I'm waiting any day like you for a tracking number and see what happens.
The store has also responded to some comments and DMs from Webkinz players, reiterating that the Plush launch will apparently come sometime in May for select Learning Express stores and fall for all locations. I know that this is still just some random toy store, but Rick was an original Webkinz retailer, and he says he's got paperwork, which seems official. It's not 100% confirmed or anything, but I trust this guy as a reliable source just as much, if not more than, a single emoji from the official Webkinz account. And lastly, to top it all off, the account ClassicKinz on Instagram reported in that new Webkinz retailer displays were made available on the GAN's website, with an estimated ship date of September 2025, which lines up with the fall launch date for Plush that Lake Zurich mentioned. While these could just be displays used for the existing Webkinz Next plush that are still in production, it could also not be. Next plush are typically set up without much branding around them, just sitting on or near their special boxes in stores. Plus, Next plush are kind of huge for some reason, and I don't know that they could even fit in these new displays. And, as ClassicKinz pointed out, there are 2 sets of shelves on these stands, which could potentially fit regular-sized Webkinz on the bottom and the smaller Lilkinz designs on the top. Coincidence? I mean, maybe, but I think not. So, if all of these threads of random information can be compiled into a working theory, here's what the future may hold for Webkinz. A re-release of Webkinz Plush is in the works, possibly launching in May or later in the fall, and the plush are most likely Webkinz Classic plush, considering all the evidence, and likely new designs at that, meaning pets that have potentially never had a plush counterpart before. Of course, this is all alleged, since I am but a humble Webkinz fan masquerading as a professional detective. Are we Webkinz investigators just crazy and grasping at straws here, desperate for info that could mean nothing? Or are we true detectives, uncovering the truth even before the official announcements, dedicated to our passion and working hard for the people? Only time will tell, I suppose. Needless to say, the entire Webkinz community has been pretty on edge for the past couple weeks, and is very eager to see what happens next. I think this comment sums up how many players feel about the possibility of Classic Plush returning. I don't know why, but there are weirdly a lot of us who have been literally dreaming about being able to buy Webkinz in stores again, myself included, which would make the confirmation of this rumor an actual dream come true. Clearly, I'm really excited for this apparent new era of the brand, as are most of us current players and collectors, though as much as I'm glad to take this opportunity to just yap about Webkinz, from the guaranteed browser relaunch to the potential re-release of Classic Plush, these major changes are even bigger than just me or the existing player base for a number of reasons. The relaunch of Webkinz in browsers is a pretty clear effort to not just restore the original experience of the game, but to make it more accessible for any and all players, young or old, new or returning. And with the possibility of new Classic Plush thrown into the mix, it makes for the perfect recipe for recreating the nostalgia of the original Webkinz mania craze of the mid-2000s. From Jellycats and Squishmallows to Labubu's and Build-A-Bears, plush collection is pretty popular right now, especially with the Zillennial age range that also happened to play Webkinz when they were younger. And nostalgia, particularly Y2K and 2000s nostalgia, has also been on the rise for the last few years. In addition to the other big announcements, Webkinz also just added all of its original music onto streaming platforms and released the first new Webkinz song since the 2010s. If that's not a clear aim for nostalgia along with everything else, then I don't know what is. With all of these classic updates, it's the ideal time for a Webkinz Renaissance of sorts, inviting in all the kids that used to love the game to revisit it in a way that's familiar to their childhoods. And bringing in new players could mean an even stronger 20 years for Webkinz, and an opportunity to keep growing. COVID, for example, was a source of returning players for the game that were revisiting and reminiscing during lockdown, only for many of them to never end up leaving. I'll be totally honest. Since I clearly have a real attachment to Webkinz, there was a small part of me that kind of wanted to gatekeep this information just a little bit. I worry about the possibility of new Webkinz plush being entirely sold out before I can get my hands on some because of their strong nostalgia factor, and it'll be just like my recurring dreams all over again. But of course, that's a silly way to look at things. As much as I do love Webkinz, I don't want to keep it all to myself. I want it to succeed and keep growing. Whether you're still a regular player like me, or you've never heard of it before this video, or you haven't played since you were a kid and all of your Webkinz have been starving since 2007. Webkinz is for everyone. And whether the plush rumors do turn out to just be rumors or not, I'm still really excited for the browser relaunch, and hope to see all of you, and your hungry Webkinz, back in the game soon. Hi, welcome to JellyTV, where I shout out a video that I think deserves some love. I recommend watching But Why Is Grr Such a Scene Icon by Sir Sugarmeat. If you're familiar with scene and emo culture, or even if you're not, you've probably seen this little guy named Grr before. And if you've ever wondered why you see him so much, even still to this day, despite him being from a 2-season kids show from 2001, Sir Sugarmeat answers that exact question. Even if Grr isn't really your thing, this is still a great video that explores the longevity of iconic media and the impact of 2000s pop culture, and I think it's really well done. A huge thank you to Daniel E. from ABQ, Kevin Evans, Baby Angel, Bunzo, Karis Desarun, Chumby, Hayden Campbell, Lojwa Animal, Lou, Luna Stephenson, Mark Kent, Nighttime Coral, Ollie E, Online Grandpa 1, Paper Sam, Pharmamags, Pixel Puppy, Shaples, Theodore Nicolowilius, and the rest of my patrons for supporting me.